Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Mimirs Council tonight. And tonight I'm joined by a friend of mine called Jay. He runs a channel called Wyrdo, and he's a little bit of a weirdo, but he's got a lot of good information. Oh, you're not on yet, mate. Now you're on. You can say hello.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't realise I wasn't on.
No, you're all good, mate. You're all good. No, but tonight we're going to be talking about the coronavirus, but how it relates to some bigger agendas. Because anybody that's been observing this pandemic, as it's been called, over the last nearly couple of months now, 6 weeks, a couple of months. Well, 6 weeks, just over 6 weeks since we've been in lockdown here at the UK. And now we've had our exit strategy, which is clear as day from our Prime Minister over there. Yeah. But anybody that's been looking into it realizes that coronavirus really at this point is not the main issue, not what it really is about. It's not about a pandemic. The numbers are highly inflated at the very least. There's no zombie apocalypse going on outside. And we're all wondering what's halted our nation and what these big changes are ahead. So when I started looking into it, and as I've said this before, but I'll just restate it for the purpose of this show, is when we were doing our original a little mini documentary, it was going to cover some of this digital authoritarianism and how they were going to use coronavirus as a stepping board, essentially, to bring in things that they've had in the works for quite a bit. Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 are the big ones, and that's what we're going to be discussing tonight with Jay, but also how they incorporate climate change and many other things. And Jay has done a lot of research on this and has been talking about it for quite some time, actually, even way before coronavirus. It's been something that has been a reoccurring theme on his channel, put it that way. So we decided with our documentary...
not that anyone actually listened to me. But
well, hopefully we'll get some people to listen to you tonight.
I was covering in September, I did actually do a video saying about how 2020 was going to have a massive recession and that they would use that as a driving force to change society in the direction which things look like they're heading in now. So obviously I didn't quite foresee a virus coming on the horizon, but
well, no, yeah, I mean it's always going to be a little bit unpredictable, but
yeah, of course. But it's not predictable in the small scale, in the micro, but in the macro, things seem to be pretty obvious, to be fair. And it's not as if this is a conspiracy theory as such, because you can go on their own websites and read this yourself. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about isn't, some shady thing that we haven't gone into some office somewhere and as a fly on the wall and heard these conversations. This is actually what these organisations are talking about themselves and actually announcing publicly. So, yes, sort of H.G. Wells talked about, which is the open conspiracy. But anyway, I won't go too much about that.
No, you're all good, man. No, but I was just saying, we will be doing a mini documentary on this. We're going to focus on the digital authoritarianism aspect of it and how that relates, because that's very relatable to COVID-19. But like I say, tonight we're just going to have a bit of a broad look at it to give people an idea of where we're coming from. Like I say, but to get more information, obviously, as I said, Jay's done a few videos on this specifically after COVID-19, and he's had a few previous to this that relatable anyway, like he says. But although Jay's already had a little bit of a say already, but I'd like you just to introduce yourself to the audience so people know a little bit about you, mate, if they're not familiar with you already.
Yeah, I mean, I run a YouTube channel called Wyrdo, as I said. But I've been sort of on the periphery of the nationalist scene for, 10, 15 years now, I suppose. I was quite a heavy supporter of the BNP back in many years ago. Now, I don't really have a description for myself anymore, to be honest with you. It's quite hard to define myself. I'm more of a kind of third positionist-ish, but I'm more sort of involved in, or more interested anyway, in sort of ecology and environment things and nature and things like that now, more than anything. And I don't really know how to define myself, to be honest with you, because I've sort of taken on board lots of different ideas which don't really gel in the real world anymore, because you seem to have these very fixed labels these days, which I don't really find are very helpful many
No,
people anymore.
I agree with you on that. And something that, as nationalists, in my opinion, it's something that we have to move out of a one issue arena anyway. If we wish to, you can't just bang on about one issue when things like we're going to talk about tonight are integrated in how they want to control us, how they want to get us into a position, in my opinion, where our ability to fight back is limited, even more so than today, and it's already pretty limited.
Yeah, of course.
But we
And
won't get.
you can see that with the
Carry on.
well, you can say that with the amount of you know, censorship there is on the internet at the moment. It's only increased since this coronavirus has come about, but it was already there anyway. YouTube has been deleting videos. Facebook's been clamping down for the last 2 years now, I suppose.
And it's only going to get worse.
It's still going in that direction. Of course it is. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of this, I don't know if this is directly relatable to the Agenda 2030, but you can talk about this. But I know it's relatable to coronavirus. One of the big issues they want to deal with was fake news. Now, people might just be thinking they're talking about the medical professional, somebody talking about coronavirus or COVID-19 and stopping that information. But as we know, once they get a law in, once they decide that they can ban content or do X or Y on one subject, they mass apply it. And that will be mass applied to us too. As soon as they decide that fake news is, they can make it either illegal or, as we're seeing already, big platforms like Facebook and YouTube are already censoring based on
this is the thing,
personal beliefs.
This is the whole purpose of these huge monopolies now, these tech giants, is that they don't actually have to pass laws. They just say, YouTube, Facebook, they can give. I mean, we already know from their own admission that Facebook, Google, and all the rest of them, they actually meet up of these globalist organisations like Bilderberg, etc., and they discuss all these things. So they go, right, I tell you what, we won't have to put through all these censorship laws because that can be problematic. Because there will be some politicians in place who are like, hang on a second, I don't like this. But if you do it through private organisations, then it's, we're a private company, and that really bugs me actually, because obviously Facebook and your Twitters and your YouTubes, and they are a public forum. It is essentially modern, like the modern day equivalent of standing in a town hall or outside the town hall and going, hang on a second, read about this, or that. But you can't do that anymore.
No.
And that is essentially the problem, that these private organisations have become a public forum, and that they're the ones that are kind of the police. They're policing it essentially, but without having to pass laws.
Yeah, something people don't understand about the China situation. A lot of people will mention China and the credit score. I've talked about this a little bit before, so I won't go into too much detail, but many people don't realise that at the moment they're still in trials, and there's different trials everywhere. So there are different ways that they're approaching this credit score problem, or this credit score solution to their problems, as it were, to the big government's problems, right? The communist capitalist nationalist government of China. But it even is a mess. But one thing people don't realise is that in many of these trials, it's voluntary. They do it by. It's not the government comes in to arrest you. It's more like a, how would you put it?
They put you in a situation where not to comply basically jeopardizes your entire life.
Yeah, complying.
You can't live your life properly.
But complying, it's basically a trust score. So one company, if you rip off one company or you lie to one company or something goes wrong, then you'll be blacklisted across all companies. The government's out. The government's not doing anything. The government will add to your score through medical data, through criminal records, through etc., because this is all centralized data. But they don't arrest you. They don't come and pick you up. It just means you can't get a train ticket anymore because that company won't do business with you, or you can't do this. But if you behave, you don't have to pay a deposit on your mortgage if you've got a good credit score.
Well, personally, I think this is where UBI is going to go. I mean, I'll cover this in a little while, but universal basic income, which everyone's now talking about because of the coronavirus, that effectively probably will be the means of introducing some sort of social credit system, because they're not just going to give you £1,000 a month for nothing. You're going to have to do something, and and to be fair, it's one of those situations where you can see if it was applied correctly, it could have some uses, but of course we know these bastards are never going to implement something correctly. It's always going to be in favour of the big multinational companies or whatever. So,
I mean, we see that already in the UK. For people that don't know, in America, if you sign on to our dole or our universal credit, as it's called now, it's already almost got the same name as universal basic income, universal credit. If you haven't got a job so long, they can put you to work. And at first, like you say, you could say, well, that could be good if it was community work. If it was something and people got it better, but you don't get an increase in your benefits, and you generally end up going to a big corporation like Tesco's. So what does that do? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out if Tesco's are getting X amount of employees at no cost from the government. That's actually going to reduce jobs, right, in the long term, because if they've got a load of shelf stackers that they don't have to pay.
It's just wage suppression.
Yeah, it's wage suppression, and it's keeping as a big part of the immigration situation is to keep wages down, right? Wage suppression.
Of course, yeah.
We know this, and this is why it's so bizarre that hardcore socialists, old school socialists, promote.
But that's the unions for you. That's the unions,
because they're completely co-opted. But
of course, yeah.
But anyway, back to our subject a little bit, because we're going off on some tangents, although they're very interesting. But with this coronavirus and the measures we're seeing tracking apps. One's already been released in Australia, for example. They're all voluntary, as we say, but they need X amount. We're seeing ideas come forward for medical passports that would include vaccines, etc. And we can see already how these could be used, as we just said, through private. Doesn't even have to be through government rules, right? They can, a company say, well, we want to see your health passport, and we want to see that you have these certain things in place to protect our customers. And if you don't have those things, or if you don't have that vaccine, or if you don't have that app, we're not going to employ you. And then straight away...
We've already seen that.
Yeah, carry on.
We've already seen that in the UK. They're saying that, because I think I was quite optimistic about 3 or 4 days ago. I was like, oh, fantastic. There seems to be quite a lot of opposition to this whole vaccine thing. Like, brilliant. Like, people are starting to see sense. But they've already thought that one through, because they're now saying that the kids won't be able to return to school until they've been traced and tracked through some sort of vaccine ID. So
I didn't see that.
You can easily see. Yeah, well, I was in The Guardian, I think 3 days ago. But if they do that, that is the perfect opportunity, because if you think about it, irrespective of what the adults think, they need to go back to work. But if you can't, most people can't look after the children and work at the same time, obviously. So they're going to go, do you know what? It's less hassle if I just get the kid vaccinated. And there will be opposition to that. But I know, again, the school unions were actually asking the government to do something. So, because it puts teachers in danger. So you can see how it's manipulated big time.
Oh yeah, and that hits actually 2 major points that we get into a bit here. One major point, when people talk about these things, they think, well, you're not going to convince me to do all this. I know they have strong opinions, but what they realise is it's not about them. People my age have already made our minds up on many things. It's going to be very hard to change my mind on some of these things. I don't want those digital passports. I don't want that tracking app, etc., etc. But it's about the children. So by getting the children to forced comply, essentially, through going back to school, they automatically go in a system, and it won't do them any harm initially. I mean, this is not how they work either. It's not like you get a digital passport and suddenly lock you in your house. It's going to be the opposite, actually. The negative effects or the inconveniences, really, are going to be on the people that don't comply. And the benefits, like I just said, with the China system. But that's an important part of how they're going to get it in. People really need to understand it's not about you, not about the people listening to this tonight. It's about your children and how they can manipulate their thoughts. And I've mentioned this before, things like nudge theory and theory of planned behavior. This is how they do it. They get you to change your opinion. So our children's opinion will be that this tracing app is fine. Yeah, it doesn't do me no harm. And we get into the situation, this is a slight tangent, but like in America, where circumcision is common. The most reason that people circumcise their children now is because, well, it happened to them and it didn't do them no harm. Right? And this will be the same, right? The kids will go, well, I had this tracing app, didn't do me no harm. My children should have it. But it's not necessarily about us. And also, again, it taps into the fact that this is about inconvenience at the moment. remember, slowly catching monkeys is always a good way to understand how they go about things. And I said like nudge theory, etc. It's about just changing behaviours over small periods of time. So over 2 years, they change someone's attitude towards something. As soon as it becomes normal that all these children have these apps or whatever to attend school, the adults will go, well, I'll get it. The workers, and then we've all got that. It's not going to be, and I've said this before, it's not going to be jackboots and militarised police that are going to get us. The soma of our society is our mobile phones and our tech, actually. The tech is the soma, is the drug. But yeah, I mean, like I say, you've done a lot more research on Agenda 2030, and although we've had a little bit of discussion about a few things already, if you want to break down some of the main points of Agenda 2030, just for people that are not overly familiar with it. Some people might have just gone, what is this Agenda 2030? I've never heard of it. So I'd like to just make sure we give those, and like I say, you're much better read on this than me, and you've already done a few videos, so I'll give you the floor with that one.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. Well, Agenda 2030 is the recent 2015 sort of reiteration of it, but the initial thing that came out was something called Agenda 2021, which is an agenda for the 21st century. And Agenda 21 was signed in Rio in 1993. So it's been going for quite a while now. So, nearly 30 years. The main goal, the thing is about the goals, when you read, I printed off the entire Agenda 21 document, and it is about 600 pages. I tried to read through it, but honestly, it is so dry. It's such a dry read that I was like, I can't get through this. Yeah. But I think the problem with reading these documents is that you don't have the key to the document. And that sounds really bizarre, but if they have their own definitions of certain words, so for argument's sake, if they said sustainable, now you might read that and go, oh, that's really good. But I don't know. I mean, that's probably an extreme example, but you might read that and go, oh, that's really good. But actually, the real definition that they mean is something completely different. It could be completely turned on its head, but you wouldn't know that because you just read it as it's presented. But anyway, the main goals are essentially, I won't go into every single, there's about 16, 17 different goals.
17, but,
yeah. It's end poverty, ending hunger, ensuring healthy lives, education for all, gender equality, and sustainable management of different ecologies. So if you take all those things together, you're like, actually, that doesn't actually sound that bad, but when you start delving into it, and we discussed this before we came on, didn't we?
Yeah.
Things like end poverty. How on earth do you even manage to do that? How do you even set about a scheme to do that? And, what we're seeing at the moment through these COVID-19 things is essentially that. Wealth redistribution, vaccination programs, ensure healthy lives, for argument's sake. You could, that's vaccinations. Ending poverty, that's wealth redistribution.
Health passport, which is essentially going to train all your medical data. And if we allow private companies, because with the digital environment, the smart city tech, etc., what that allows is the mass centralization of data and the output of that data. So companies might have to show your health passport, then you might not get a job based on health conditions, etc., which is these things are not in place at the moment. You might not get a loan or a mortgage based on your health passport, which they don't ask for at the moment. You know what I mean? It's harder to ask for.
Yeah. But obviously, from Agenda 21, you then got Agenda 2030, which was basically an update.
Yes.
They looked at what they've already achieved, which, to be fair, they had achieved quite a lot. And in 2015, they decided they were going to have another agenda. Agenda 2030, as it sounds, is an agenda for 2030. So you've got, and I'll get onto this in a second, but that is why a virus happened to miraculously come out of thin air in January of 2020, when they've had this, when you've got a decade before 2030, is somewhat suspicious. But I'll get onto that in a minute because there is more details to that.
Yeah, I mean, a few more of the things are like, now this one, because you've got to understand the language, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. And this is something that is very relatable to COVID-19, because I just mentioned here that one of the things that I've been looking at when I've been looking at this, how the solutions to COVID-19 are all digital authoritarianism and smart city tech. But when I was reading through all of this, underlining all of this, you had basically cities were showing, hey man, we've reduced our emissions through this lockdown by almost exactly the number we need to reduce it by the Agenda 2030 targets. They have lots of targets for everything, especially climate change, because they see this as an urgent issue that if they don't solve soon, the whole planet's going to, destroy itself. Evaporate. But the thing is here that we're seeing, so this data that's being collected in COVID-19 in lockdown is exactly what we need to do. So this reduction of industry, this reduction of movement is at the moment the only provable way they can reach these goals. They've actually given themselves the evidence to show that, and we're seeing this with the things like we may have to keep social distancing in, we have to keep certain things in, and have to look at, and as you said with the poverty,
new normal,
yeah, the new normal. We're also seeing, like you said, with I forgot where I was going then, but with poverty, and like you said, end poverty sounds beautiful, but the only real way to end poverty, when you realise that most of the population lives on less than $1 a day, and then you look at how much the West lives on, is redistribution of that wealth, same as we had about 10 plus years ago with the climate change when it initially came out, when they started redistributing wealth to Africa, etc., because we'd messed up the country and we'd got rich off destroying the world. I mean, these are not my words; these are what they were basically trying to say. So when we start to, like you say, when you start to read between the lines of some of these agendas, and the way the digital authoritarianism and COVID really links is through COVID, they want to bring in these measures to control, track. Everybody, as I said before, everybody's already got a smart meter. Everybody's already got a lot of this tech in their house, but at the moment it doesn't really do anything, right? It doesn't. But when we get these more centralized data systems through 5G and the smart city tech, which is being massively propelled, they'll be able to then say, Jay, for example, he's using a lot of electricity. We already have smart meters on our water, right? You got to pay per liter of water. You got it, and they might go.
The thing about,
but they might decide you're only allowed X amount of liters of water. Yeah, and it cuts off.
We were saying about this before, weren't we? About how technology starts off as something, as a sort of a gimmick. You start off with smartphones, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
it's really fun. You get this smartphone, and it's got like these like soundboards and these silly games that you can play. And that's how it was like 10 years ago. Now it's like, oh, download this app and let us track everywhere you go. And it was the same thing with, the what they call the smart home appliances. Like, oh, it's really cool. You can turn lights on from your mobile phone when you're not even there. Like, you don't really need that. we've gone for centuries, thousands of years without smart technology. Why do you suddenly need it now? And it's the gimmicky thing to get you. It's like the hook. And then once I've got you by the short and curlies, that's when they start to introduce. Oh, by the way, you now got to have a smart appliance. Yeah. And some things like smart washing machine. Why do you need a smart washing machine? And the only thing I can think of is eventually, at some point in the future, they'll be able to look at your smart meter and they go, right, why did you wash one pair of pants at 90 degrees in the washing machine? Right, well, that's really naughty because you've wasted energy doing that. So we're going to charge you an extra £1 for that. And that's the way it won't be like no one's going to kick, like you said, no one's going to kick down your door and go, no, you've done something wrong. It's going to be financial and just through general inconvenience, really, more than anything.
Convenience and inconvenience. It's a two-edged sword. So if you're good, right, you might get a better allocation, right, of resources because you're wiser than this guy over there. They don't. He uses them badly. He loses some. And now we're talking a little bit in the future here. We're not saying this is going to happen next year or tomorrow or everything. But what, as Jay said there, we're getting all this smart tech, and when we get the 5G towers, etc., they'll be able to take all this information, and it's using artificial intelligence to manage our cities. And this is why Agenda 2030 is so important, because when it's managing our cities, it'll give us the city a score. Do you get what I mean? It'll say this city is like producing way too many carbon emissions. Yeah.
They already do it.
Yeah, they already do it. But I mean, when they've got this data, it's even they can really accurately calculate, and they can take measures out of party. They don't have to tell you. They can literally take measures from their dashboard. They can go, okay, we're going to raise the taxes on this, or we're going to just stop the usage of something. Yeah, because the city's already
Well,
overused.
well, a lot of people have forgot to mention this. A lot of people have probably already heard of Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030, probably without even knowing it, because the everyday terminology that people use is sustainable development, and you see that
Yes.
in government, you see that in local towns, you see that even in big businesses. They all talk about sustainable development, and this is almost like a pyramid scheme. It comes from the top, from the UN or whatever, but it filters its way down all the way into, it gets its fingers into every single pie. And no big organization anyway, it has come away from this unscathed. So this is like a massive, there's tentacles everywhere with this. If you go to your local council, I'm sure if you was to do a freedom of information request, you could probably get documents that come down from higher up about sustainable development. But this isn't something that
Yeah.
I'm not talking about something that is out there and a bit fucking, David Icke or whatever. This is something that has been happening now for 20 odd years, at least. So
every single, if you look up Agenda 2030 or something just on YouTube, and you look up these videos for climate change and all this, all related to Agenda 2030 and sustainable development, like you say, they're buzzwords. If you look that up on YouTube, you'll find that nearly every big company, right? This is a bizarre thing. I mean, we're talking Shell, oil companies, to pharmaceutical companies, to everything, right? They've all made their own little videos on this. They've got sometimes got like 100 views, but they're all on their website. Yeah, they've all got these little cartoony videos. I'm sure you've seen them, Jay, like loads of them, like these little cartoons speaking to you like a child. These music,
yeah.
But they've all done them, and they're all talking about how their company or their organisation is going to make these goals happen, right? How they're going to be there. Yeah.
But this is what I can't understand, why there's so few people talking about it. Like, we've had this massive coronavirus thing going on at the moment, and I'll get into some more sort of better details in a minute, which links it more to the coronavirus. But I can't understand why no one else is talking about it. It's out there. It's information which has been out there for decades. It's not hidden. It's not like I'm not some spy who's hacked into some computer system somewhere and got all this information. It's out there. So why? It doesn't matter if they're nationalists on the nationalist scene or in the left wing scene or whatever. Why is there so few people talking about it? I can't work it out, and it makes me feel like I'm losing the plot a little bit, because I'm like this crazy guy putting post-it notes all over the wall. Like, I can see the connections, but no one else is.
I because I think sadly we live in a fast-paced world where it's more. I mean, at the moment we've got certain events happening, which people will just talk about endlessly, like that Armid Aubrey. No one's worked out that his name almost sounds exactly like armed robbery. But anyway, but what we get all these events happening, people talk about, and they're the buzzwords, and we've got low attention spans. Nobody wants to read, like you say. These are hard to digest. These documents, they're very hard to digest. They're boring. They're very, like you say, flat. There's not much in them. And people, it doesn't make good videos, I suppose. And we live in an age where people want this constant stream of videos, this constant stream of ideas. Everybody's got to be up on it, and they're fast. Hot takes, yeah, and nobody wants to take the time. I mean, when I still haven't we still haven't finished our documentary, or even really fully began it. It's still in the research stage of the digital authoritarian aspect, digital authoritarianism aspect of this. Why? Because I want to make sure that what I'm putting out is correct to the best of my ability. Yeah, and I can evidence this.
Your struggle at the moment, because I mean, I've been trying to keep on top of it, but every day there's more.
Yeah,
there's more things to confirm what I think, and I'm like,
yeah,
I can't keep up with this. It's literally, I'd have to be on it almost, every hour of the day, to sort of try and keep on.
Oh yeah, I mean, once you've got the general idea and general feel, though, for a video, just to let people know how, I try to take the strongest points and just highlight them. There's no way I mean, with our COVID-19 little document, I could have highlighted, and the one I did on the stats, especially about the dangers of isolation and lockdown. I could have done 2 hours talking about that alone. But if you can highlight, condense it, and hopefully that people watch the video and then go to look at themselves. They can look at these studies. They can look at these ideas. It's not out like the same with tonight. hopefully people look at this Agenda 21, try to think, so to do some critical thinking and see how how COVID-19 can relate. And you said a minute ago that you wanted to relate it a little bit more. So if you want to go ahead with that now, to try and
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Well, anyway, the first thing to really note was that the United Nations was actually starting to warn the world that there was going to be a recession of some sort this year. And it's actually, I think they released a report about a week before the September Sustainable Development Summit, which they had on the 23rd. So they were trying to, I don't know, warn the people at the tops of these organisations that something was brewing. Didn't really hear much about it on the mainstream news, as you never do. The mainstream news, they tend to pick out a little aspect, but they don't connect it to the other things that were in the same document. They do that a lot. So they try and break up the information so it's harder to see. So yeah, they were warning that there was going to be a recession of some description. And then we had in September the 23rd to the 25th of September, we had the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Summit. And that, I'm sure you'll all remember, was when Saint Greta sailed her boat, which was the boat that apparently the boat that she took from Europe to America was actually named after Edmund de Rothschild originally, who's a Swiss banker, and allegedly was buying up land in Palestine from the Ottomans back in the 1800s. So take from that what you will. But she gave this "How dare you" speech, and obviously the BBC and all the mainstream news massively concentrated on that issue. Oh, she's trying to save us. Isn't she great? Isn't she great? What they didn't tell you was that there was multiple meetings around that time at the same summit, and one of those was a speech given by Mark Carney, who's the Bank of England governor, and essentially you can read between the lines. You can read the speech; it's out there. If anyone wants the link, just or you can ask in the description. I'll put in a comment below on the main video. But anyway, if you can sort of cut through all the crap, it essentially says that they're going to defund fossil fuels and they're going to make make these companies reinvest in renewable energy. And this is an exact quote. Firms that align their business models to a net zero world will be rewarded handsomely. Those that fail to adapt will cease to exist. The longer meaningful adjustment is delayed, the greater the disruption. So basically, he's saying that there's going to be a disruption of some description, but companies need to get on board to end this disruption.
Again, and we see there, just to interface that, we see there again the reward, the incentive, and the convenience.
Carrot and the stick.
Carrot and stick, exactly. Carry on.
Yeah. So not only that, and then again in October, this is actually the BBC picked this up, said again that companies that didn't invest in renewables would go bust. And then just recently, about 4 or 5 days ago, he came out saying, "Oh, how coronavirus is terrible, but isn't it a fantastic opportunity to start investing in renewable energy?" So, you can see how this agenda fits in there.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the exact from their own website again. This isn't something I've hacked a computer mainframe somewhere. This is actually on their website. It says the SDG Summit, so that's the Sustainable Development Goals Summit, resulted in the adoption of the political declaration, gearing up for a decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. World leaders have called for a decade of action to deliver the SDGs by 2030 and announced actions that they are taking to advance the agenda. Accelerated action. So that's the critical thing here. A decade, i.e., 2020 to 2030. So what's the chances of this virus coming up in 2020? January of 2020.
Exactly.
You see where I'm going?
No. I mean, it's very convenient for them, and it's got us already thinking, as we've already mentioned quite a bit, already thinking of these new ways to track us, to manage us. Like I say, it's all there. The smart meters are all there. The smart water meters, smart electric meters, and as we said, these drastic actions, and in the actual Agenda 2030 in their goals, they say the urgent need. So we're going to see this. As I said this before, I said this even when I went on Red Eyes. COVID-19 is the T. Yeah,
Mm.
It's climate change and Agenda 2030 stuff. There's the club, right, and that's gonna hit them into their new hit us into the brave new world, yeah, that they've got planned for us. And like I say, it's very convenient that this has happened, and also travel. I mean, a lot of people within our circles were saying, when it comes to immigration, well, the immigration didn't stop. They're coming over on boats now. But when they're talking about stopping international travel, they're talking about you going on holiday. They're talking about
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
doing business because you're the ones flying, right? These hopeless immigrants, they're just trying to get a better life by
Yeah.
taking their rubber dinghy across the channel. But they're talking about you, so everybody's like, yeah, restriction and global, and that's I understand that. I don't go abroad very often. It's not a problem, but they're talking about your restriction of movement, and they don't just mean out of country. One thing
No.
we've seen with this, one thing that's helped reduce the emissions in the UK right at the moment is the fact that you weren't allowed anywhere except for essential. Well, I mean, we've heard this a lot. They've started, and this is another aspect that needs to be understood about nudge theory and theory of planned behaviour. They've got us thinking on essential and non-essential. Listen, imagine, right? Essential goods, essential travel, essential workers. Yeah. So we've suddenly started to go, is that essential? Now, when we bring in climate change into this, right? When we phase the climate change aspect into this, that's be using exactly the same language, I assure you. Yeah. What's essential? Yeah. Oh, well, that actually, like you say, washing a pair of underpants, right? That's not essential if it's just one pair of. Yeah, I mean, I'm using your silly example from earlier, but so they're going to start to go, well, to meet our climate change goals for Agenda 2030, we're going to have to, evaluate what is essential. And this, I mean, that is the best understanding of like nudge theory. They're getting us to think in a different way. So now we look at our life as what's essential, what's not essential. And once they've got you to think in that way, they can then use that new thought pattern to bring in new ideas, and it will all be related.
And again, as you say, this comes into the environmentalism about all the problems with. And don't get me wrong, there are issues with it, like obviously materialism and consumerism, etc., etc.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah.
And that did need to change, but the way they're doing it is like such a sudden jolt that, and it's I don't like. It's fine if it's done in a way that people understand, but they're basically manipulating people, which obviously I don't like. That's basically I don't like these shady fuckers essentially manipulating a crisis or even a false crisis, because to me that's just not the done thing.
Well, I mean, the disingenuousness at the beginning shows that it's nefarious, right? That if I enter into a conversation with you and my initial point to you is a lie, then well, everything built from that lie is also a lie, right? To a certain degree, because and they built up this lie, and now they go to, so we know that it's nefarious. We know they're going to use it for not the reasons they're telling us, which, as I say, is disingenuous, and it tricks people. So, I mean, like I say, I could even go on more with the essential worker stuff and stuff, because suddenly I'm not an essential worker, neither are you, Jay, right? So we could have then in this
we're going to become Soylent Green.
Yeah, because we're not essential, right? You only need essential workers. That's all it is, and the credit score, and this all ties into it. But yeah, carry on, Jay. Sorry, I just interrupted there a little bit.
I don't know. This is one of those things. I mean, with the SDG summit, a lot of people don't realise this, but Boris Johnson was present at the UN summit in September when they gave all this environmental spiel.
And he did an absolutely amazing. I mean, the speech.
Yeah, the speech was fantastic.
Bizarre, right?
Yeah, because he was talking about
exactly what we're basically talking
about. About the risks of freedom posed by technology. Now, the problem here, you've got a conflict of interest, right, with Boris Johnson. And I know a lot of people who probably are watching this who aren't from the UK are like, I don't really give a shit about Boris Johnson, like British Prime Minister, but this is an important aspect, okay? Because Boris Johnson's maternal grandfather was James Fawcett, who was a Queen's Counsel lawyer, director of studies at Chatham House, and Chatham House is basically not a secret government, but they can talk about things and they never get released to the public. So they're like an official meeting that doesn't ever, and it's not subject to freedom of information requests, but this was obviously back in the 50s, so freedom of information didn't exist in it. Even now, that's kind of like their sort of government within a government.
Yes.
And he was one of the main authors who oversaw the writing of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So on one hand, you can go, well, maybe Boris Johnson's been, maybe he's been genuine when he says that he worries about the risks of technology to our human rights, essentially, and like our rights to freedom of speech, etc., etc. However, Boris Johnson's father, Stanley Johnson, is an environmentalist who worked at the World Bank, the European Commission, was an MEP in the 80s, and has written about 20 books, all about depopulation.
Yeah.
So it's like, well,
when I watched that speech, just to add there, when I watched that speech, it's almost, to me, honestly, it looks like, I mean, they've got the buffoon, right? I mean, and for people that don't know in America, they've really got to understand that Boris Johnson, before he became Prime Minister, even when he was Mayor of London and before that, he was literally the buffoon, the idiot, right? He played the absolute buffoon on TV. He used to go on comedy shows and just be an idiot, yeah? So they got the buffoon there talking like some crazy conspiracy theorist in the way that he does it, right? He does it almost semi-jokingly, right? And he for ages, yeah, as he tries to get his words out. He looks like an idiot. His hair's never brushed, right? So they've got this guy talking about the stuff we're talking about, who's universally hated now, pretty much in the UK by many people, anyway. And it's almost like he's doing it tongue in cheek and mocking us. To be really honest with you, I mean, it's like they're mocking our position.
I mean, you can look at it both ways. You can almost say that he's done it to kind of say, "Well, I did try and warn people," but actually secretly behind the scenes, because Boris Johnson's dad, Johnson, was a part of, or was heavily influencing, shall I say, the Extinction Rebellion protest movement in the UK, which I think started in 2018, but really kind of came to a head in October and November of 2019.
Yeah.
So again, take from that what you will. Like literally at the same time that they're calling for this summit is going on, and they're calling for a decade of accelerated action on the 2030 agenda, you've got a protest movement going on in the UK calling for the exact same thing. And you've got very important people who are members of really high-profile organisations that are actually working in cohorts with this protest movement. The media would have you believe that it's a bunch of students. Yeah. The students are just naive foot soldiers. They think they're doing them. And to be fair, a lot of their concerns are valid, but they're using their naivety as a battering ram, really, to go, look at all this social pressure we're having to change. Yes, we've heard you. We need to. And hang on, I did write it down somewhere. There was a Sky News interview. Gal Bradbrook, I think he's a journalist, came and said, behind the scenes, there are politicians who agree with us. And she said that live on Sky News, and the Sky News interviewer even said, so hang on, you're saying that there's government officials who are agreeing with you. Now, you could take that another way and say, well, what do you define as government? Because you could have some advisor who's not really any part of decision making.
I mean, with you say, the proof is in the pudding, right? When they're pushing for the exact same things, right? But pretending to be this like a counter government movement, but they're actually, if you remove all the fluff, and you get down to the baseline, they're on the same line, right?
Of course.
And just to explain to people,
we saw the exact same thing.
Yeah,
we saw the exact same thing with a lot of people are probably too young to remember this, but in about 2008, we had a massive protest going on at the same time that the G20 meetings were on about the financial collapse in 2008.
Yes.
And I ended up getting involved with this. I won't go into too much detail about that, but I ended up getting involved in one of these organisations, like these leftist organisations, for a short time, about 3 or 4 months. And essentially, they were really sort of, as you would expect now, as an older person now who's not so naive, I kind of expect it, but they were really sort of manipulated by this protest movement. Was all basically in cohorts with all the unions, etc. And again, every issue that this G20 meeting was about in London with all the heads of states from around the world, every issue that this protest movement was talking about, i.e. the environment and banking regulation, this meeting was set up to discuss. And the G20 meltdown protest is what it was called, morphed into the Occupy movement, which I think more people probably be aware of. The Occupy movement went on for about 5 years, was it? But
and all the same talking heads at the moment in the conspiracy side all got on board with it, all were jumping around with it.
Yeah. But the Occupy movement were arguing in favour of banking reform and wealth equality, which is exactly what this lot with the Agenda 2020 doing 2030 and stuff is all about.
Exactly.
So majority of these protests, these massive protests that you get, when you get hundreds of thousands of people turn up, they're almost certainly someone has funded or someone whether it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if you go to like Venezuela or something, those protests are probably organized by American CIA or something. I don't think a lot of what you think is a counter movement is very often funded by some massive organization or some government somewhere.
And just to explain this quite easy in our circles, and just to understand how the foot soldiers, as you call them, the younger people, they have got genuine concerns. I mean, we can see this exactly the same with people like, for example, in the nationalist stuff, Tommy Robinson. It's not that the people that support him haven't got genuine concerns. They have the same concerns as us with immigration, etc. But the reason Tommy Robinson's getting all the media attention as the counterpoint, right, is because he's essentially the plan. Yeah, he's the one that's been chosen to head it. Yeah, and through his organisations and things that he works with, he can push that out. But I mean, I think that's widely understood within our circles in the nationalist movement. But the same is happening to the left, and you've got to understand this. There's genuine concerns by some of these, like you say, students that. They've got genuine concerns, but they're being directed into, like you say, like the Extinction Rebellion movement at the moment.
The consolidation of power and wealth to an elite few.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure, if they actually understood, probably they'll look back in 10 years' time and think, "What the fuck was I doing?"
Yeah.
But wisdom, unfortunately, is something you acquire over time, and I honestly don't have anything against these younger kids because they don't know.
They don't know.
They just, shut up, boomer. What do you know? Well, actually, quite a bit, and that's another thing.
Especially when it comes to our folk. I mean, this is something that goes across the board. Actually, our folk our younger people are the target. As I said, we're not the target; they're the target. They're under the mass mind manipulation to go along with this. This is why your universities and schools are all run by commies, right? Because they all promote these ideas, and the children grow up with these ideas, and then they start acting out. And like I say, in 20, when they're like 40 years old, they might look back and go, "Holy shit, I was led astray." But by then, it's too late. Yeah, the measure's already in, and their kids are the next ones, and their kids are getting worse than they did. Yeah, it's even more. So we can't sometimes blaming the people, blaming our own folk, especially for being essentially abused in a way, is a bad narrative, and this is why we need
counterproductive.
It's counterproductive. We need to open the discussion, speak to them in a discussion sense. But anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent there. Just
sorry to disrupt you. Yeah. You haven't. You can't hear a screaming child in the background, can you?
No. I can hear all I can hear is my child running around the bedroom at the minute.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we've got the same issues then, because one of my kids has woken up and decided to start screaming. It's always sod's law when you're trying to do this, but hopefully my wife won't come down and beat me up for not helping out.
Yeah, well, just to explain, me and Jay are both family men. We do stand part-time, and obviously we both have young children. Actually, Jay, you had a new arrival relatively recently, mate, so congratulations.
I did actually, yes, only 4 or 5 days ago, so I'm sure she's probably up there cursing me at the moment with one screaming child and a newborn. But anyway, we'll try and get on and see if we can finish this relatively quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we can always. I mean, yeah, we can.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Back, mate. You know what I mean? We can always do.
To be honest, there isn't a great deal left to cover. To be honest with you, because obviously after this SDG thing occurred in September, the UK government actually came out and said that they're reinvesting a load of money in renewables and tech companies, which leads me again to believe that this whole climate protest movement was actually funded by these people. There is some evidence to suggest that. I haven't got details in front of me, but I know there is an interest in. There is one guy who's been on this UN thing for quite a while, and he'll probably have more information. So maybe we can come back again and discuss that. But anyway, so they've announced the UK, I think, is the first country to actually legalise or put into legislation things for climate change, which is why which is why I made the video back in September or October about why I thought that the UK was going to become essentially like a building block between the US and the European markets. Because with Brexit going on,
yes,
you've got this issue now where obviously they're talking about US trade deals, they're talking about European trade deals. Well, if this thing comes in now with all this 2030 shite, they can go, right, well, we'll make London, because London is a financial centre, it's a financial hub already. So we'll make you the carbon tax people, and all trade will run through, because this kind of goes into something that Hillary Clinton was talking about before the American election. So it was like 5 years ago now, talking about basically what was the TTIP. But she was talking about a hemispherical union between America and Europe. So again, this ties in nicely with everything that's going on about. But to kind of reiterate a point, I think the reason, the problem we've got at the moment now is, I think there's this kind of sort of naive victory thing that people have got. Oh, we won Brexit. Oh, we won because of Trump got in. I honestly think they're going to use Brexit, Trump, Chinese protectionism, Salvini, Bolsonaro in Brazil. They're going to use like Hungary, all these countries which are like, fuck you, I'm not going along with your globalist ideal. They're going to use that as an excuse now to go. The reason why so many people died, and the reason why we struggled to contain coronavirus, was because there wasn't enough international cohesion.
Yes.
So now actually we need to bring in these new organisations at the UN or at an international level, where everyone is now directly answerable to the World Health Organization or the World Trade Organization, and that's what's going to happen. And
I mean, yeah, you touched on a lot of points there. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's the people that thought that this was going to reduce the massive call after this is the to stop anything like this happening in the future is this big global effort, right? I mean, how we got to work together. And I couldn't agree with you more on Brexit either. As soon as Brexit came out, I mean, Brexit has been great for them. They had a divided public, almost 50-50. Now, anybody that knows...
It's funny how every single vote
right?
recently has been 50-50. Yeah, every single vote across the Western world has pretty much been 50-50.
Everybody knows that if you can divide the population so what, they end up so intensely fighting each other that they lose track of the game. There's no unity. The last thing they want amongst a nation's populace is unity. I mean, that's one of the reasons for the immigration, right? You pump people with different ethnic backgrounds into a group, they would never fully unify. They will always seek, and especially as in the UK right at the moment, they give incentives and it's not an accident that Muslims get off with certain crimes that others that an ethnic Englishman wouldn't. That's deliberate. It's to create this disharmony. It's to create, and this is not saying that Islam is good or the people that are coming over are good in any way. What I'm saying is, it inherently, even if they were the greatest people in the world, right? Even if it was a group of people that were amazing.
The thing is, the government will know that they're going to have inherent problems in importing like a different culture. It's obvious. I mean, I can go in again. I mean, I'm not going to discuss this today, but because it's another big subject. But this comes down to the Barcelona Declaration, which was part of the Mediterranean Union. So they've actually created. Not many people know about that either. Mediterranean Union was formed. Obviously, with the whole Mediterranean basin, which I think eventually was going to get bolted on to the European Union. But that comes into why Libya was invaded. But I'm not going to go on about that because that's a massive distraction.
Yeah, I mean, but there's lots here. Yeah, I mean, and like you say, Brexit as well. My initial thoughts were, I mean, you straight away had the Trump talking to like, we're trade with you, blah blah blah, and we know how trade works. You can trade.
Put it this way: when Greta Thunberg went to that UN summit last year in September. Trump was there, was he not? So why didn't Trump, if he's an anti-globalist, why didn't Trump say something and go, hang on a second, I don't like all this Agenda 2030 thing. No, he never said anything.
Oh, no.
He's a puppet.
Oh, of course he is.
He has to be more intelligent than he appears, which is why he keeps coming out with these stupid things he keeps saying. Well, it's got nothing to do with him being stupid. It's an act.
Oh, yeah, it's like Boris Johnson. I mean, he went to some of the top schools in this country, and then he stands there like I mean, he doesn't brush his hair. He looks down. He mumbles his word. I mean, nobody's like that. I mean, you can't be that much of a bumbling idiot and then become prime minister. I mean,
no.
This is the joke. They're both puppets, and they're both similar in actually. You know, they both had big TV careers. You know, they both weren't from TV but came in. But anyway, like they say, that's another subject compared to this. But I mean, with Brexit though, yeah. I mean, it's all set up. What you got to understand is, at the moment, we're being reactionary. We're allowing them to change narratives, and people are taking small victories for the cost of the war. In my opinion, they're trying to go. Well, we won Brexit, and we didn't win Brexit. If Brexit was always meant to be this close battle that was going to bring out these things, and also The thing that got me about Brexit, and so I was just going on a bit about it here, is everybody kept saying it was going to stop immigration. It wasn't, because the Conservative government had already promised to double the amount of immigrants that
From Commonwealth.
that they were going to bring in anyway, regardless of the EU quota, right? They were going to double the EU quota regardless. So everyone was like, we're going to stop immigration. All it's going to stop is European immigration. That's because it has stopped the free movement between Europe. But people were like, it's anti-immigration. It's like, no, it's not. We actually, like, just before Brexit, they said we're going to double.
They must have known. Thing is, when they announced that they were going to have a vote on it, they must have known what the public response was going to be. They don't have all these stupid think tanks and again, this probably plays into why. I mean, we're going massively off on a tangent now, but no one, but you have these things where you basically get all these academics come on to telly and they go, "You're wrong, you're an idiot," and they know how that's basically poking someone. And come on, do something. What you can do about it? What you can do? There you go. You've reacted. Now we can do our thing. Now it's obvious. And I didn't notice it. I didn't think this at the time, but looking back, it's fairly obvious. But again, it's one of the things you learn, didn't you? I won't get tricked about that.
So I'm a bit older. I've been around these circles for 20 plus years. Yeah, so I've been watching, observing, and we see the patterns play out. And I know you've been around a long time too, and we see these patterns play out. So we can start. It's like I say, we can't predict the minute gains, but we can predict the overall gains. We can start seeing where they're heading with this. And like you say, we have on one side these the more conspiracy orientated. They like push these jackboots, like I say, militarists. But when you take a bit of a broader approach and a more sensible approach, you see that it's we're already having it. One of the things that when I was looking at as I'm doing research for this digital authoritarianism, is I'm going, they're going to do that, and as I actually look at it, it's already there. It's just not widely used. It's already there. It's not that they're going to do it. They already have these things. They're just not. People are not using them. It's like you can go onto a government site. You can get a government ID, .gov ID, that will basically you'll never have to put your details into any government. You'll just literally give your ID. Thing. Yeah, an online passport for it.
Well, I'll give you an example today. I mean, obviously because of this thing that's going on at the moment, I'm trying to look for work, and I applied for just a supermarket job because, let's be honest, it's the only thing that's available right now.
And it's open.
Yeah, exactly. And I couldn't remember what I logged into yesterday, or I couldn't remember what my login was. So, and I didn't give them any details on my Facebook. And I mean, this is a very sort of off the point, but I clicked on. I saw what happens if I click Facebook, and it logged me in, and it had the jobs I'd applied for on their website. And I'm thinking, but I never gave you my Facebook.
Yeah.
So how the hell? So I've put in my email address, but it's already linked because of my email address. Presumably, it's already linked my Facebook account.
Yeah.
And I think, you bastards.
And this is the thing with this centralization of data. It's transfer of data between public and private. So the idea of privacy begins to just disappear. I mean, it really does. The idea of privacy. They're sharing data, and nobody reads the small print. I mean, it's a joke, right? No, literally nobody reads the small print on the app.
Well, you can't. It's impossible. You'd be sitting there for like 3/4 of an hour trying to read this fucking small print.
And it's deliberately done like that. But this is the point. We're already giving away these rights just because they're not. But people think, well, they haven't come kick my door down in jackboots, so I must be okay, right? It's like it's not how it works. It's having the ability for on-off switches. That's the most important thing. On-off switches. They got the ability to say, you broke the law, on-off switch. They don't have to put you in jail. Like I say, China's models, and maybe it's something I need to talk about more of the China models, because people don't really understand that most of China is willingly accepting these ideas. They're not anti them at all. The only people that are anti them are certain dissident groups. Well, they're obviously going to be anti them because, like us, they don't want a government that's hostile to them.
Snooping on them. Yeah,
snooping on them. If you're a dissident group, I mean, this is what was so funny about people in our group saying that lockdown is a good thing, right? It's like, and you're a libertarian if you disagree.
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of people out there going, "Oh, the lockdown's great because it's going to be the end of globalism." Like, are you for real?
Yeah, I know.
Like, you're just on another planet. I mean, I'm not being hateful towards anyone like for saying that, but I think you just need to look at the bigger picture. Yes, there will be certain elements who go, hang on a second, this came about because of globalism, but the people at the top who run all the media and et cetera, they can be able to manipulate this any way they want. And they're not going to turn around and go, actually, do you know what, guys, you were right. Globalism was the problem. we'll tone it
Yeah,
down now.
yeah, we'll send everyone back,
we've
and
been we've
we'll
been
go back.
working on this for 55 years. We've been working on this project, but actually, do you know what, guys? You're totally right. We
Yeah.
see the errors of our ways now.
Well, this is
Yeah.
the idea as
Did I
well
talk
that
about the IM? Sorry, did I say about the IMF?
we mentioned it briefly, but yeah, I mean, go for it, man. If you got a
I
good
was going to
point on
say
it, yeah.
because in addition to the September SDG summit, which was obviously last year, um,
Yeah.
as soon as Corona, well, I say as soon as, but on February the 23rd, there was a
Mhm.
meeting between all the different G20 finance ministers um, met the IMF at in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and well, the thing about Saudi Arabia, everyone thinks that it is like, obviously this backward society, and to a degree that's true. But the prince, apparently the king there, or the sultan, or whatever he's called, he's got dementia. So it probably explains why there's not been any like I say progressive in the loosest sense, but like some progression towards not stoning people to death. Um, but his son, the prince, has basically taken over. There was something called Saudi Vision 2030, again 2030,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah. Off the back of that, they're creating this massive city, which borders on Israel, believe it or not,
yeah,
and that's going to be some ginormous smart city in the middle of
yeah,
the desert. And then actually, just this year, they've already started removing people from the area so they can start work on the construction. But anyway, part of this Saudi vision was that they were going to start reducing their reliance on the oil industry. And obviously, I'll give you the goals from the IMF. I'm not going to, it's not exact quotes, but the IMF goals on this meeting was they must work together to contain COVID-19, predictable.
yeah,
Point two, cooperation on trade. They want the world to go from trade truce to trade peace. Now, I can only assume that means that they don't want borders on trade anymore, which is what they'll say, that the problem with the economy was worsened because America and China having this economic war almost.
yeah.
And stage three was to collaborate to scale up climate mitigation.
Well, again,
Right.
again,
So
if you try to read between the lines, like how can you have trade peace, right? How can you've got to standardise prices? I mean, across the globe, you've got.
exactly,
I mean, that's the
that's
only
it, and that's yeah,
only
and this all
solution,
goes
right?
into the digitalization of currency.
Yeah,
Uh, Essentially, an international version of Bitcoin is what they're basically going for.
yeah,
Bank of England already started talking about it. But on the point of Saudi Arabia, why did they have the meeting in Saudi Arabia? Now, I don't have any proof on this, so don't take it as gospel. But on the 8th of March,
hmm
so nearly 2 weeks after this meeting in Riyadh, Saudi basically collapsed the arse out of the oil prices, and their official thing was just having a price war with Russia. It's a bit strange that they've literally just talked about cooperation
yeah,
on
yeah,
trade
yeah,
from trade truce to trade peace, and then Saudi Arabia engages in an oil price war with Russia. But the essentially what I'm trying to say is that has dropped the arse out of the oil industry to the point where they're actually giving it away about 2 weeks ago. They couldn't actually find any buyers, and there's little. I mean, when I was doing the notes for this talk, did actually go over it, and it turned out that even still, they cannot find buyers for barrels of oil.
yeah.
So they're going for peanut, which you might be thinking, oh, that's brilliant, because petrol at the moment has gone down to £1 a litre. And yes, it is on the short term, but not that you're going to go anywhere at the moment because you can't.
You can't get it.
But the long term problems with this are, and I think this is a big worry, is food scarcity. Because if oil prices become to the point where it actually becomes uneconomical for companies to produce oil, they can start to do. This might sound strange, but if oil becomes not worth drilling, you drive up the prices. So does that make sense? Maybe
Yeah,
I'm looking at it
try
the wrong way.
supply and demand.
If
Yeah,
there's less, if there's less oil being
basics
produced,
of
obviously the
supply
price
and
will go
demand.
up.
Yeah.
But they can manipulate it so that oil production stays low and prices remain high, which again feeds into all this climate thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean that's something that will be dealt with the climate change as well. I mean, and there are
mm,
other concerns with food as well. I mean, there's been a lot of food wasted. I know in America, in the UK, and in other areas where because of coronavirus, they haven't had the manpower to deal with these things.
mm,
Trucks to deliver it, which you would think the infrastructure of it, a nation would be first doing, right? If you want to use the military for anything in a nation in a crisis, it's move and transport food and make sure the food gets to the people, right? I mean, that's the. But
well, it's funny you should say that because the Conservative government in the UK only announced about 2 months ago now, I think, that they were considering a policy like Singapore, where we wouldn't produce any food at all, or at least the farmers and fishermen wouldn't actually get any government support at all, and we just import all the
collapse
food.
the market,
which is just absolutely outrageous. Because I mean, at the moment, this is something I've been looking into, and I was going to produce another video on this in the next few weeks. But at the moment, I think we could produce about 80% of our food in this country, which I guess if you was in an emergency situation, you could probably
squeeze out that
reduce,
extra 20%.
Reduce waste. You could probably just about do it with the population being this high. But yeah, again,
well, if you want to talk about a nation's sovereignty, its ability to be self-sustainable is the most important thing to sovereignty. If you are 100% dependent on other nations, you're essentially in debt. You're essentially at the mercy of others, which is the worst thing you could do as any nationalist. But I mean, obviously, we're not in that kind of situation.
But this ties into, I mean, this is interesting to say that because we were talking about this before we came on, weren't we? About the best way to manage this would be to return as many people back to the land as possible. Yes. Do some form of permaculture, and everyone. Because the thing you got at the moment is, and this kind of lines up with something I was. This is the thing. Like, it's a bit kind of autistic, really, to make what do they call them? Like a political theory, your own political theory. Yeah. I had this idea that you could return as many people back to the land as possible.
Yes.
To counter the fact that you've got this rise in automation, because people have to have something to do, and growing your own food is probably about as rewarding a thing as you could possibly do. Being at home all week with your family, but you're all producing food in a sort of community setting. That would be in my opinion, that would be almost a utopia. Well, it'd be like Hobbit villages, but with solar panels.
That's the origin of the tribal nature of humanity, right? We started off in small communities, since the Neolithic, we had small farming communities. That's how we developed. And before that, we had small hunter-gathering communities, which was the same thing, just different way to get your food, right? You would go out and gather, but so that's the human nature. It's not communist, but they want to do the total opposite.
They want to build these mega cities.
Oh yeah, they want to de-ruralize. They want to move everybody. I mean, this is another thing with the 2030. I mean, and it's not just Agenda 2030, right? If you just put in 2030, the amount of other things that are side issues that are not actually mentioned in Agenda 2030 specifically, but all have this day.
I mean, one we haven't talked about is, I mean, I've already discussed Saudi Vision 2030. The other big one is, I think you kind of take this with a pinch of salt, but it's something with the Singularity 2030, which is just talking about how they suspect there's going to be some artificial intelligence revolution and technology is going to advance exponentially because of this computer thing. They've probably already got it. Let's be honest. They're probably part of what they're doing at the moment is probably some sort of a preparation for that massive change, because you can't just go, oh, by the way, artificial intelligence is around now. It's going to fundamentally change everything about our lives.
Smart cities are run by artificial intelligence already. Smart cities, like if you go to South Korea and Singapore, as you've already mentioned, those two are some of the leaders. You go to China, artificial intelligence is massive. Self-learning computers are they're at the heart of this centralized network. They're it's all going into this AI.
Who programs the computers?
It's all going into this AI that basically says, look, this is how they try and sell it you in their little cartoons, right? There's a traffic jam there. So the AI instantly sees through all the tracking devices and all of its cameras and facial, and then it can redirect traffic. Yeah.
Well, they're already talking about that.
They're already talking about it. That's already done in South